Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to talk about, you've guessed it, M733s. Of course, we'll be talking mainly about, mainly focusing on the accuracy of the new VFC M733 here. But, you know, it's a rare opportunity that we can talk about all the M733 series right here. And I kind of want to talk a little bit more about what a great time it is nowadays for the 733. It's always been kind of a surprise for me as to why, you know, this is such a popular model in the airsoft world that no single company makes them, or at least in a massive production, you know, like sort of way, right? This right here, right, is not really an M733. This is actually just a WE model right here, right? But it's close enough, right? And up until now, essentially, right, this is the only way that's relatively affordable for someone to get an M733. Now, the downside, of course, is that if you were to look, right, I love that someone pointed this out to me, that this is technically a historically accurate model, because there was a version where it still had the A1 style herring sight, but it didn't have the the brass deflector, and that was considered accurate. I'm not sure if the model that didn't have the forward assist would still have the A1 or the A2 grip. I'm not sure about that, to be honest with you. But the point is, the M733 series back in the late 80s and early 90s were really just like a Frankenstein model where they just mix and match. So I think it's going to be very difficult to pin down an exact model, because again, they used a lot of different versions out there, right? But again, this model tends to be a little boring, in my opinion. I mean, don't worry, get me wrong, I like this. WE did a really good job, but it is a little boring. And for me, I actually liked, my favorite actually is the one with the A2 upper. But at the same time, I think it's also, it'd be nice to have options, right? Now, the other one that came out, though, was always the Viper Tech, right? So this one right here is a Viper Tech M733, right? Now this one's a little bit different. This one is a A2 model, right? With the A2 carrying handle right there. That one is my favorite right there, right? Now these are super hard to find in general. And I don't know how accurate some of the details are going to be, because again, these are such mix and match, anything from the colors, the paint color schemes. Most people say that is correct for the period, I think. And I think this paint job here is a little bit too light, actually. I did that paint job, by the way, so don't blame them. But anyway, this one here, of course, the A2 model will always have the brass deflector, but I like the sight system in the rear back here a little bit more, because it can adjust for elevation rather quickly, rather than having to use the front sight post adjustment to do it during initial zeroing. Now, but the problem though is this, that Viper Tech they make very limited runs of these M733s, and second ring is, if you could find them available, they're incredibly expensive. I remember this set me back like an entire year worth of airsoft. So at first it's like, oh, it was totally worth it, but then after the entire year, you're sitting there like, wow, I can't get anything else, and it really makes you wonder, like, was it really worth it? I mean, now it is, because, you know, he's like, oh, cool, I have one, and I really wanted one, right? But at the same time, if you're like, well, I have to tighten the belt and not get anything for another year, something to think about, right? Whereas something like a WE, you know, it's still rather expensive, but I think it's you know, you're not going to be stuck for like maybe at most six months, you know, 3 to 6 months without having to, you know, invest anything in airsoft. But that's reasonable, right? And it's a little easier to find than the Viper Tech. But all that has changed. Actually, before we go to this one here, one model that almost worked out, and so far it's very disappointing that it isn't, is with the Tokyo Marui. Now, of course, the Tokyo Marui is the M4A1, right? So that one has the longer barrel, but you can, and has the, you know, the removable carrying handle. But Angry Gun made a kit where you could sell the aftermarket parts so that it could be a similar to this one here, where it has the A1 upper receiver here, and the A2 lower, but it also has the brass deflector right there. That's key for me. That's my favorite part. I have to have the brass deflector. That's just it makes no sense because I am left-handed when I fire these, but it doesn't really matter because there's no brass case because these are airsoft, right? So it doesn't really matter. But to me as a collector, I like the brass deflector, and that you could have had the quality of the Marui in addition to the specific retro style that you're looking for. Of course, you need to buy a different barrel to change it out so that it's like there's 11.5, not the what do you call it, the 14.5 inch. But it was possible. But then someone bought it, you know, and at least they only bought the upper. And I watched the review and I was so disappointed because it didn't fit. Now they didn't buy the lower, they only bought the upper, right? And the upper would not fit with the lower. Because they didn't make it to specific specs to the Marui, I guess. So that makes me a little bit nervous that plan might not work completely. It's not confirmed to be completely debunked, but I'm a little worried that might not be an option. Because Marui, while more expensive than a WE, is still cheaper than, way cheaper and much more available than the Viper Tech. So, since that Marui and then aftermarket parts option is still kind of on the, you know, not really a realistic option, I think today we finally have an option that is real, that's practical and relatively affordable. This, of course, I'm talking about the VFC. Now, time will tell. Only time will tell whether this holds up in terms of quality. I try not to watch videos of other people so I don't have a biased opinion, but I was a little nervous when I got this because I'm not sure who makes what, but for example, I had a Umarex, which is, I believe, also the same model that makes like the same model company with VFC, or and that USP, yes, was not great. I mean, it's still working, but it's not that great in terms of quality. I mean, it looks nice. The exterior was awesome, right? Nothing tops the qualities of the exterior of the VFC. But internally, what really matters, maybe not so good. But on the flip side, I had their Stark Arms model, which is, I believe, also a VFC, and theirs worked out pretty nicely. So to this day, it still works. So it's hard for me to know exactly whether this is going to be good or not in terms of quality. But again, as expected, right, the quality of the externals are great, I would say. So this isn't a review, obviously, of the product itself right now. We're just going to be talking about how well this thing fires, or how accurate it does. But I did want to just talk about how the times are changing now, and how I think something that was once really elusive potentially can become more accessible to the public now, which is a great thing, I think, for a relatively reasonable cost, right? Now back to the meat and potatoes of this video, basically. This thing has an issue where it seems to, the accuracy did not seem to be as good as these two here, despite being the same barrel length, relatively speaking. At least, internally it's slightly different. This one's a little bit shorter, by like half an inch. But it doesn't seem to be doing as well. Now, one would argue that these aren't designed for long distant ranges, but these are more for like CQB. But I think it's still kind of for its length. There are other models that seem to, you could argue, oh well, this would cost more, so this should have, that's obviously has to be more accurate. But what about this? WE does really well, and it costs even a little bit cheaper than this, actually. So, what can it be? So one thing that popped in my mind is maybe, I forgot to clean the barrel. That's what I forgot to do. And so I've only put through about 200, so I'm going to clean it real quick and then retry it with the .2s Now, I'm not fortunate enough to have a a long lawn or an indoor range where I can test all this, but I think we can do what we got. And since we're gonna make the argument that this is designed for CQB anyway, I think distance of 40 feet, is going to be relatively helpful for our reasoning here. And if it doesn't improve with different weights and with a clean barrel, then maybe, that's something, that's to take note of it, that it's not just inherently just not a good accurate system. And maybe the little bit extra you pay for the VFC here is really because of that. You want the logo, whereas the WE, you're not paying for that. You're not paying for the logo exactly. This is actually painted on by itself. That's why it looks really kind of crappy. But hey, it's if you look kind of far away, you might say, hey, that's just a really rusted or a vintage model that's been seen better days, right? And that's now collectible. I don't think anyone would believe that. But okay, so let's get started. Today we'll also be using these. Someone suggested in my last video to get one of these. I'm really excited to see how to use these. I just wish they weren't so expensive. I bought these, and these come with the avec le technologique splash splash technology, so you can be able to see them very well. But they were like $10, I think, for just like 5 of them. So I'm a little nervous, but I think it's like I'll save it. I'll use it for this occasion here to test some of this stuff out here. But whew, man, that is not cheap. Well, all right. So one of the things, when I'm flipping through the manuals that I actually, always read, but I never actually see talked about, is about cleaning the inner barrel, right? You got all these stuff about, how to operate, blah, 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 hop up adjustment, even stuff here, about how the product's muzzle energy, set at for both European Union standards and US standards. This product, you got some warranty. Talk to Evike if you have problems. Talk to Cybergun France if there are any other issues. But nothing in this manual about cleaning the barrel, and I think that's something that might be affecting the accuracy. So what I'm gonna do is the way I do it. These are little cut up pieces of cloth that I use basically from what I was gonna say. They're the same ones that you used as lens cleaners. You want to use something that doesn't scratch the barrel, actually, and well, obviously, actually, that's pretty clear. And then I usually just like to unscrew this so you get easier access to the barrel. Sometimes though, especially if you leave it on, it kind of is an extra side that picks up dirt, so it's harder to clean it. So it's just easier to take it off while you're in this process. And then just run down the barrel. Let's see if this is actually dirty or not. Okay, so the barrel runs down. Feel the resistance. Okay, so let's pull it out. So that's what it looks like inside. Now, keep in mind that I've only fired this, probably less than 200 rounds. And I've never really cleaned it when I got it. So could this really be affecting it? Maybe. I mean, I know it does affect it to some extent. I just don't know if that will be enough to significantly change it from the almost 3-inch groupings at just merely 30 feet to something that's more of like the Marui. But let's just, let's try. Let's do one more swab of the barrel. Okay, and just as an FYI, I'm going to compare this to the Viper Tech every now and then when I see some differences. So one thing I want to point out though, let me just pull this out. All right, looking cleaner. And then of course we'll rerun it through with some a tad bit of silicone oil just to make sure it stays clean. But one thing I want to point out though, right here, is that notice how the barrel, the inner barrel is a little bit receded. So not that really affects any accuracy or really to any extent, especially such short distances. But the inner barrel actually ends about right here where my thumb is right now. On the Viper Tech, actually, they're both, supposed to be 11.5-inch barrels, but the inner barrel actually extends all the way to the very end right there. So it's truly both an inner and outer barrel at that 11.5-inch. So this is kind of more of like maybe 11.25, or maybe 11 inches, and then the outer barrel is an 11.5. Again, not that it affects accuracy or anything like that, but just something to point out. Okay, get that nice and clean. All right, and of course, because there's a little bit of oil in there, we probably just want to fire a couple rounds just to get the excess oil out before we run this test again. Hopefully, look at that, still rather dirty actually. Wow, and that's actually maybe one more round of oil should do the job. Okay, so after about 4 or 5 different cleanings, I think it's now coming out fairly clean. So I think I've gotten it nice and wiped up. And of course, Cybergun actually sends you 2 of these flash hiders. They're a little bit different though. So this one's the one that the metal one, and it actually is nice and it's nice and heavy actually, but it's actually accurate to the original style, because the A1 style for this model here is supposed to have these slots throughout the entire bird cage, right? Whereas this one right here, the orange one, is the A2 bird cage hider, right? So it actually is not slotted at the bottom because it's designed to be a muzzle brake in addition to a flash hider. So this model isn't accurate. Of course, we'll keep it on if we ever transport or ship the product. Of course, we'll use that. But it's also nice that they ship these. These are counter 14mm negative clockwise threads, by the way. So they fit in very nicely if you want to do some photos or whatever. But yes, it's very nice that they have the option. Okay, so now that we've had it, let's go get a few excess rounds out, and then we'll get back to the testing. All right, so I'm using a square, the pillow cube here. I'm gonna wrap it in a garbage bag. That's what I'm looking for. And I'm going to tape this on there because I'm still using this to sleep on. I'm obviously gonna wrap this a little bit so it doesn't get dirty. But it's perfect size for this actually. So I'm gonna tape this, and apparently this is an adhesive pad to it. So you can just tape this on here. So I'm hoping this would actually also like prevent the rounds from bouncing back too far and everything like that. Now, the plan is right here. I'm really hoping to be able to use all the little mini squares and not have to waste an entire one of these targets for a single test because it's really expensive. So what I'm gonna do is, because these rifles are kind of sighted in for this range, 40. This can be at roughly 40-ish, a little bit more than 40 feet. They should be sighted okay. So where I'm looking at should be the point of impact. I think I haven't tested this one at this range actually, so I'm not sure, but it should be. But since the first 6 rounds will be all the .2s after the barrel's been cleaned, so because I'm not trusting that it's very accurate, I'm gonna have to use a sender so that it could capture more of the impact points if it needs to have a larger surface area. Then we'll switch to the 0.28 gram BBs and try to see if that changes our luck and decrease the group size, and we'll try to go for here. Then just to show off the ability of the WE, I'll do another 6 rounds right here with the 0.2s, and then I'll do another 6 rounds of 0.2s with the what was it called, the Viper Tech right here, and then maybe I'll do another 6 rounds right here with the VF or the Marui here, just to demonstrate for demonstration purposes. Okay, let's go. I think that was 6 there, not 100% sure, I lost count. So obviously the windage is a little bit off, so we'll just have to readjust it a little bit later down the road. But there you have it. So those are the .2s. The splash wasn't as significant as I thought it would be, so that's, I don't know if that was worth the money then. So let's try again, aiming at the top, I guess bottom right side now, and go with the .28. Let's see how that goes. All right, so those were, I'll have to watch the footage later, but those were 6 of the .28s. I'll try to migrate the target a little bit to the right now because I want to try to test out the WE now. All right, let's try the WE now in the center. So there we go, that was the WE at that distance, 40, a little bit more than 40 right now. Let's repeat that with the Viper Tech on the last spot. All right, I'm gonna repeat the Viper Tech one, and with a lot of mushrooms back here at the bottom corner and see how that goes. Bottom left. All right, I think we have time for one more, and we'll try the Marui now at the upper corner. Before I forget, on the Marui, I did switch to same distance, everything like that, but I did use the sights that were designed for the point, the long distance sights, and then for the M733 by Viper Tech, I actually used the sights for the 0 to 2, the larger aperture sight, not the long distance sight. So look at that. So I'll watch this video again and we'll see how the shots land. So there we have it. If you stuck in around for this long, here's kind of what I think. Basically, if we're gonna go with the best hands down, I would say it has to be the Marui. But we'll go back to that, I guess. In this case, the VFC, after cleaning the barrel and repeating it with a 0.2 grams at 40 feet, the groupings still stay around roughly 4 inches or so. And it seems weird. There's no really like pattern that, maybe one's a flyer, or maybe, you can, if you threw out that one flyer, the grouping would be smaller. It just seems, kind of the way it is. There's no real pattern to it. I expect 4-inch groupings at 40 feet. And then, changing it, perhaps, maybe because the last 10, 15 feet in the range is a little bit outdoors, there's wind outside, that's fair. So that's going to cause some issues. And so with the wind involved, the 0.28 grams, it seems to kind of help a little bit. But not a whole lot. I mean, these aren't there probably aren't enough shots in here to make it to see a huge pattern, but maybe it seems to help a little bit. I guess that very first one was technically a 0.2 because I forgot I didn't change the mag. So it's possible, they were landing the bottom, but just because they were kind of hitting on the right side, because the sights, the rear sight wasn't really adjusted or zeroed correctly for windage, and so it's landing a little bit to the right. So maybe there's something to that. The heavier the 0.28 was helping out a little bit, possibly. At least for the wind component of it. The WE, I would say it feels a little bit better. In my opinion, it feels better. I know the groupings here, the ruler here just says that, it seems a little bit higher. But if you look at the ruler, I would probably throw out one of them as a flyer, since you can see that most of them clusters around about a 3-inch grouping, and there's a nice cluster. Again, there seems to be an issue where there's a zeroing issue among all of these, except for the Marui, because they're consistently landing in the wrong spot, because I need to adjust the sights again. But again, I think the WE did a little bit better. There's more groupings, closer groupings here, at least at 40 feet. Switching over to the ViperTech, ViperTech has always been kind of a mystery to me. It's a bit erratic, I would say, because when it works, and this is kind of something we've covered in our last video when we were trying to do like a statistical accuracy test. When it works pretty well, like within its groupings. But every now and then there seems to be some flyers, and it seems to be more consistent with the ViperTech where they're flyers. So they have like 3 or 4, on par, right where you're on the money, and then 1 or 2 that are just like, where did that go? And I think that's kind of reflected here again. So it's hard to discount those, because if it's consistently having flyers, it makes it kind of, it does increase its group size, right? So when it's shooting well, it's probably within 2.5-inch groups right there, probably on par with the Marui. But again, those flyers really kind of detract from its consistency and its I guess it's what's the word I'm looking for? It says reliability. Now, when we found our last video, we didn't really see a huge statistical significance, but I guess if we were to repeat this test, someone pointed out, this, and I agree, there isn't enough sample size here to make a true statistical statement. But the more we do this, the more I notice that the ViperTech does have a little bit more flyers. And then of course, this is probably why Marui will never be dethroned. They make such good quality products that basically, even though they market only for a certain population or a certain country, their products are wanted by the rest of the world, basically. And this is kind of why you can see it here. Look at this. It's both. In this case, I'm just going to say this is zero. This has been zeroed correctly, so it's zeroed right. It's hitting where I'm aiming. But also look at the grouping size right there, right? Maybe the biggest size, probably 2.5 inches at 40 feet. Consistent, and it's just a solid, very solid piece. And this is not just something that is a fluke. It's pretty much reliable, and it can be repeated oftentimes. So In the end, this isn't about the Marui, this is about the Viper Tech, and I think the pecking order kind of goes VFC, kind of erratic, and no real pattern. Then comes I would argue the Viper Tech here. But the Viper is good, but again, it just suffers from occasional reliability issues and flyers every now and then. WE, pretty good, pretty reasonable, I would say, right there. I mean, if you minus that one flyer, and then of course nothing really tops the Marui. Now I know this goes completely different against what I kind of said in the last video, where there really wasn't a huge statistical significance, but it's probably just because I didn't have enough rounds to really iron it out. Well, I hope you all found this a little bit helpful, and tell me what you think, and maybe if you found these results helpful, and maybe you disagree. See you all next time.